Turning to Washington now, Michigan Congresswoman Candice Miller made a surprise announcement last week. She's decided not to run for re-election next year. Miller says 14 years in the nation's capital is enough. She wants to come home to Michigan. Miller doesn't know what she's going to do next, but she wants to give back to the state. So could she possibly run for another statewide office? Let's start off first with this announcement, which was very surprising to me, Stephen.
Yeah, I talked to her this week and said, you're not 90 years old. You haven't been there for 40 years. What do you think you're doing leaving office? Because that has become the sort of standard, especially in Michigan, is that you get that job and you stay until you really can't anymore. And she said, she went to Washington never thinking she would be there for the rest of her career, and that she felt like she'd done what she wanted to do. Was a little frustrated, I think, with the climate in Washington at this point, although not as frustrated as some other people have been, and just decided that it was time and that she could do other things.
I think that's what goes to show you that what kind of lawmaker she was. The fact that she said, this is the job. I'm not entitled to be here year after year or ride it out until whenever. But she was a friend to the Great Lakes, Nolan, and she really got a lot of good things done and was a good moderate voice from this state, an experienced voice.
Candice Miller's a conservative, and she should make no mistake about that. She's a good conservative, and she was a good congressperson, particularly for Michigan. She was very much focused on her state. She never moved to Washington full time. She kept her roots here, her home here, and that's part of what's going on. Her family's here, her grandchildren, and if you've listened to her over the last few years, she's talked about this sort of being torn between Washington and here because she is so close to her family. I wasn't that shocked. I do think the way Republicans handle seniority in Congress a little different than Democrats. If you're a chairman or a subcommittee chairman, you only get 6 years and then you have to step back. You saw the same thing with Rogers and Dave Camp. They really don't want to go back to Congress in a lesser role. So the Republicans do tend to move out a little more quickly than Democrats who stay until their teeth fall out. So I'm not all that surprised by the move, but it is another very important congressman that we're losing from Michigan, and one who really understood the role. I mean, she didn't get Potomac fever. She was all about Michigan when she was in Washington.
All right, and she was also a very successful Secretary of State here in Michigan, which begs the question, she comes back, she's done with Congress. Is there a role for her now in state politics in some way, shape, or form, Steve?
Yeah, I don't know. I did ask her about that, and she said that she had nothing on her radar at this point. I mean, I think, frankly, the opportunity for her was last year with the open Senate seat in Michigan. She would have been a very competitive.
She doesn't want to go back to Washington.
Well, right. That's true. That would have been going back to the national stage, but that was, I think, that would have been a natural thing for her to try for. Obviously, she could run again for a statewide office here and would be a very competitive candidate, but she didn't sound to me like that was what she was thinking about. She was thinking about coming home, as Nolan said, being closer to her family, and she talked about some opportunities in the private sector, so maybe that's what she'll go do.
So no Candice Miller for governor?
Oh, I wouldn't rule that out at all, because she said several times, I'm not ruling anything out. When a politician says that, you can pretty much...
The door's wide open for anything.
Well, you can pretty much assure that they're thinking about it, and I think you'd have to consider her the front runner or among the front runners for the governor's race in 2018.
In 18, I don't even want to think about that yet. But we want to invite Fred. Come on out real quick, Fred. This is near the end of the show. We want to say a big thank you to the Michigan Association of Broadcasters for recognizing MiWeek and many of the programs here at Detroit Public Television with an excellence award. And look at that, it's see-through, so we could actually see your, there you go, we could actually see Stephen's hand through that, so we got that last night.
To us.
There you go, so it's a nice recognition, and we appreciate that.
To Christy.
Oh yeah, right, because I keep you guys in line. I deserve combat pay for that. That's going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to continue our conversation right now online, right after the show, so go to MiWeek.org for an extra segment you're not going to see on TV. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter during the week. Make sure you find us there. I'm Christy McDonald. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, we'll see you next week. Take care.